A cold wind whipped through Utica, Montana territory. On the morning they found Lila James collapsed on the church steps, her newborn son wailing in her trembling arms. Blood soaked through her skirts, the red stain spreading like judgment itself across the weathered wood of the church porch. Reverend Whittaker's wife had been the first to find her, and her shrieks brought the entire town running, some to help, most to gawk and whisper behind raised hands, their eyes alight with scandalized curiosity. That had been 6 months ago. Now, on this biting autumn morning in 1878, Lila stood at her small cottage window, watching as another family crossed to the opposite side of the dirt street to avoid passing directly by her home. "There goes another one," she murmured to her son Samuel, who gurgled happily in his cradle, blissfully unaware of the cold shoulders turned against them. At 6 months old, Samuel had his mother's eyes deep brown with flecks of gold, but his hair was beginning to show curls the color of wheat fields, a constant reminder of the man who had promised Lila the world before disappearing when she told him she was with child. Lila turned away from the window, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the laundry basket. Despite the whispers and sneers, she had managed to secure work doing washing and mending for a few sympathetic souls in town. The widow Abernathy, who lived on the edge of town, Dr. Fuller, who seemed to care more about healing than judging, and oddly enough, Miss Penelope, who ran the saloon. It wasn't much, but it kept a roof over their heads and food in their bellies, if just barely. "Looks like we'll be eating beans again tonight, little one," Lila said, tickling Samuel's chubby foot. The baby squealed with delight, his laughter the one true joy in her life. A sharp knocking at the door startled her. Visitors were rare these days. Lila smoothed down her simple cotton dress, patted her hair which she'd hastily pinned that morning, and moved cautiously toward the door. "Who is it?" she called, one hand on the latch. "Mrs. Bartlett," came the clipped response. Lila's heart sank. Eleanor Bartlett was the mayor's wife and head of the Ladies' Auxiliary. Since Samuel's birth, she had made it her personal mission to remind Lila of her fallen status at every opportunity. With a deep breath, Lila opened the door. Mrs. Bartlett stood there, spine rigid as a fence post, her pinched face revealing her distaste before she even spoke. "Miss James," she said, emphasizing the miss with particular venom. "The Ladies' Auxiliary has discussed your situation at length. Has it now?" Lila replied, keeping her voice steady despite the dread pooling in her stomach. "We feel it improper for a woman of your circumstances to be living so close to decent folk. There's a cabin available at the old mining camp. The auxiliary is prepared to assist with your relocation." Lila's fingers tightened on the door frame. The old mining camp was 3 miles outside of town, isolated and falling into disrepair since the small silver vein had dried up 2 years prior. "That's very thoughtful, Mrs. Bartlett, but I'm perfectly comfortable here." The older woman's nostrils flared. "It wasn't a suggestion, Miss James. The property owner has agreed not to renew your arrangement at month's end. The town council has been most clear." Behind her, Samuel began to fuss, sensing perhaps his mother's distress. Lila fought the hot tears threatening to spill. "I see," she managed. "Is that all?" Mrs. Bartlett sniffed. "Reverend Whittaker mentioned you might consider giving the child up. There are proper Christian families who could raise him without the stain of his beginnings." The suggestion hit Lila like a physical blow. "Get off my porch," she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "Get off my porch right now. Your moral failings, my son is not a failing." Lila's voice rose, the months of hurt and isolation erupting. "He is perfect and innocent and the best thing I have ever done, and I will die before I let anyone take him from me." Mrs. Bartlett stepped back, clearly startled by the outburst. Well, I can see you're beyond reasoning with. Good day, Miss James." As the woman marched away, Lila shut the door and leaned against it, sliding to the floor as tears finally broke free. Samuel's cries grew more insistent, and she forced herself to stand to go to him, to scoop him up and hold him close. "It's all right, my love," she whispered, burying her face in his soft neck. "Mama's here. Mama won't let anyone take you away. We'll figure something out." But as night fell and Samuel slept peacefully in his cradle, Lila sat at her small table, a single candle burning as she counted and recounted her meager savings. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough to secure new lodgings or to take them somewhere they could start fresh. The brutal truth was that they would be forced to the mining camp, where winter would soon close in, where illness could take hold, where they would be truly alone. As dawn broke the following morning, Lila had barely slept. She moved mechanically, preparing for the day, feeding Samuel, and setting out to deliver the washing she'd completed. The air held the sharp bite of approaching winter, and she drew her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders as she walked through town, head high despite the stares and whispers. At the general store, where she needed to purchase thread for her mending work, the bell above the door chimed cheerfully as she entered. The store fell silent, conversations halting mid-sentence as several customers turned to stare. "Miss James," Mr. Olson, the shopkeeper, acknowledged stiffly. "Mr. Olson," she replied, moving toward the sewing supplies. "Just thread today, please." She could feel the weight of disapproving stares as she selected a spool of black thread. Samuel, strapped to her chest in a sling she'd fashioned from an old blanket, began to fuss, perhaps sensing the tension in the room. The door opened again, the bell jingling, and a tall figure stepped into the store, bringing with him the smell of horses and open country. Lila kept her eyes down, focused on soothing Samuel, barely registering the newcomer until a deep voice cut through the uncomfortable silence. "Folks around here always stare at mothers and babies, or is today special?" The question, asked with a casual drawl but edged with steel, caused Lila to look up. The man standing by the door was a stranger to her, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. But he wasn't smiling now as he surveyed the room, one thumb hooked in his belt near a well-worn holster. "Nathan Keller," Mr. Olson greeted, his tone noticeably warmer. "Didn't expect you back so soon. Cattle drive went well." "Well enough," the man Nathan replied, moving further into the store. As he passed Lila, he tipped his hat slightly. "Madam," she nodded, surprised by the simple courtesy, and returned to selecting her thread. Behind her, she could hear Nathan ordering supplies: flour, coffee, sugar, ammunition. "Put it on my tab, would you, Olson?" he said. "I'll settle up when I sell those horses I brought in." "Course, Nate. Anything for our favorite cowboy," Olson replied with a chuckle. "You staying around Utica for a spell this time?" "Thinking about it. Might winter here before heading south again." Lila placed her thread on the counter, waiting for Olson to finish with Nathan's order. Samuel had quieted, his eyes wide as he stared at the cowboy's hat. "That'll be 3 cents, Miss James," Olson said, his tone decidedly cooler than it had been with Nathan. As Lila reached for her coin purse, Samuel let out a sudden happy squeal and reached toward Nathan with chubby hands. Startled, Lila tried to hush him, her cheeks burning as several customers tutted disapprovingly. "Sorry," she murmured, not meeting anyone's eyes. "No need to apologize," Nathan said easily. He stepped closer, smiling at Samuel. "That's quite a grip you've got there, little man." To Lila's horror, Samuel had managed to grasp the leather cord of a pendant that hung around Nathan's neck, tugging it free from his shirt. "Samuel, no," she gasped, trying to untangle her son's fingers from the cord. Nathan laughed. "It's all right. He's just curious." He gently freed the pendant, a small silver cross, and tucked it back into his shirt. "Strong boy you've got." "Thank you," Lila said softly, finally meeting his eyes. They were a startling blue, clear as a summer sky, and currently crinkling with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Peterson," the blacksmith's wife, cleared her throat loudly. "Mr. Olson, I believe I was next," she said pointedly, shouldering past Lila. Nathan's smile faded as he observed the interaction, his gaze moving between Lila's flushed face and the other woman's obvious disdain. "Mrs. Peterson," he acknowledged with a curt nod before turning back to Lila. "I don't believe we've met. Nathan Keller." "Lila James," she replied, aware of the disapproving murmurs his friendly overture had sparked. "And this is Samuel. Pleasure to meet you both." He touched the brim of his hat again. "You need help carrying anything home?" The offer, so casually made, sent a ripple of shocked whispers through the store. Lila felt every eye upon her, judging, condemning. "No, thank you, Mr. Keller," she said quietly. "We'll be fine." She paid for her thread and hurried from the store, feeling the weight of stares on her back. Outside, she paused to adjust Samuel's sling, her hands trembling slightly. "Miss James." She turned to find Nathan following her out of the store. "Mr. Keller, please," she said, glancing anxiously at the store windows where several faces watched them. "I appreciate your kindness, but you shouldn't be seen speaking with me." His brow furrowed. "And why is that?" Lila laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Because I'm Utica's fallen woman, Mr. Keller. Didn't you know? Unwed mother, town scandal." She shifted Samuel higher on her chest. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I have washing to deliver." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her again. "Miss James, wait." When she looked back, his expression had softened, understanding dawning in those blue eyes. "Let me walk with you," he said, no longer a question. "My horse is hitched down by the blacksmith's anyway." Before she could protest further, he fell into step beside her, shortening his long stride to match hers. They walked in silence for several moments, aware of curtains twitching in windows as they passed. "You're new to town," Lila finally said. "You shouldn't start off by associating with me." "It won't do your reputation any favors," Nathan shrugged. Never much cared for reputations, or for folks who judge others without knowing their story. They had reached the doctor's house, where Lila needed to deliver a basket of laundered linens. "This is my stop," she said, pausing at the gate. "Miss James," Nathan said, his voice lowered. "I couldn't help overhearing in the store. Sounds like you might be in need of work." Lila tensed. She'd had offers before from men who thought her situation made her desperate enough for certain arrangements. "I have work, Mr. Keller. I do laundry and mending. My ranch hand quit on me last week," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "Headed to California for gold fever. I'm looking for someone to help out around the place, cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. Proper job with proper pay. There's a small cabin on the property where you and your boy could stay." Lila stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you offer that to a complete stranger?" Nathan smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Call it instinct, Miss James. I'm a good judge of character, and you strike me as someone who works hard and keeps to herself. That's exactly what I need." He paused. "Plus, I can't cook worth a damn, and I'm tired of my own attempts." Despite herself, Lila felt a smile tugging at her lips. "Where is this ranch of yours?" "About 5 miles north of town. Not too far, but far enough." The implication was clear, far enough from the judgmental eyes and wagging tongues of Utica. I need to think about it," Lila said, though her mind was already racing ahead, calculating the possibilities. Nathan nodded. "Of course." I'll be at the saloon tonight if you decide you're interested." He tipped his hat again. "Good day, Miss James. Samuel." He touched the baby's cheek gently before turning and continuing down the street. Lila watched him go, this strange cowboy who had shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than most of the town had in 6 months. It could be a trap, she knew, or it could be salvation. That night, after Samuel was asleep, Lila sat beside his cradle, watching the rise and fall of his tiny chest. She thought of Mrs. Bartlett's ultimatum, of the isolation of the mining camp, of the approaching winter. Then she thought of Nathan Keller's offer, of his kind eyes and the casual way he'd stood beside her in public, unafraid of the town's judgment. "What do you think, my love?" She whispered to her sleeping son. "Should we take a chance?" Samuel slept on, peaceful in his innocence. Lila reached a decision. The following morning, she packed their meager belongings into a single trunk. She wrote notes to the few clients who still gave her work, explaining her departure. Then, with Samuel securely wrapped against her chest, she made her way to the saloon where Nathan had said he would be staying. Miss Penelope was sweeping the porch when Lila arrived, her eyebrows rising at the sight of the trunk. "Moving day?" she asked, leaning on her broom. "Yes," Lila admitted. "Is Mr. Keller here?" A knowing smile spread across Penelope's painted lips. "Upstairs, room 3, she winked. "Good for you, honey. About time you got out of this town of vultures." Lila's cheeks flamed. "It's not like that. He's offered me work as a housekeeper at his ranch." "Sure, honey," Penelope laughed. "Whatever you say. Want me to watch the little one while you go up?" "No, thank you," Lila said firmly, adjusting Samuel, who was beginning to stir. "Is there a back entrance I could use?" "I'd rather not walk through the saloon." Penelope pointed to a narrow alley. "Back door's unlocked. Stairs are to the left." "Thank you, Penelope, for everything." Lila had never forgotten how the saloon keeper had been one of the few to offer her work after Samuel was born, no questions asked. "Take care of yourself, Lila, and that beautiful boy." Lila made her way through the back entrance and up the narrow stairs. She hesitated outside room 3, suddenly questioning her decision. But what choice did she really have? Taking a deep breath, she knocked. The door opened almost immediately, revealing Nathan in shirt sleeves, his dark hair still damp from washing. He looked surprised to see her, but a smile quickly spread across his face. "Miss James," he greeted, his eyes moving to her trunk. "You've decided to accept my offer," Lila nodded. "If it's still available." "It is." He stepped aside to let her enter. "I was just about to head out to the ranch. Perfect timing." The room was sparse but neat, his few belongings already packed. A gun belt lay on the bed, and he moved to buckle it on as Lila stood awkwardly by the door. "I should warn you," she said, finding her voice. "I'm a good cook and I can keep a house clean, but I know nothing about ranch work." Nathan shrugged. "I don't need help with the animals, just someone to keep the place in order while I'm working." He grabbed his hat from a hook on the wall. "Ready to go?" "Yes," Lila said, surprised by his lack of questions. "Mr. Keller, I feel I should be clear about something." He paused, hat in hand. "What's that?" "Samuel and I come as a package. I won't be separated from him, not for any reason." Nathan's expression softened. "I wouldn't dream of asking you to be, Miss James." He settled his hat on his head. "Now, shall we go before the gossips get wind of your decision and try to stop you?" They left through the back door, Nathan carrying her trunk easily as they made their way to the livery stable where his wagon and horses waited. He helped her up onto the bench seat, handed her the trunk to place at her feet, and then climbed up beside her. Samuel was fully awake now, staring wide-eyed at the horses. "Hold tight," Nathan said, releasing the brake and flicking the reins. As they drove through town, Lila kept her head high, even as people stopped to stare at the sight of the fallen woman leaving with the cowboy. She caught a glimpse of Mrs. Bartlett on the steps of the Mercantile, her mouth open in shock. "Good riddance," Lila whispered, too soft for Nathan to hear. They headed north out of town, the mountains rising majestically before them. Samuel babbled happily, fascinated by the motion of the wagon and the new sights. For the first time in months, Lila felt something like hope unfurling in her chest. "It's not much," Nathan said after they had been traveling for some time, "but it's peaceful. 20 acres, small herd of cattle, few horses I'm breaking to sell." "How long have you owned it?" Lila asked. "Going on 2 years. Bought it after I got tired of driving other men's cattle across the territory." He glanced at her. "Been meaning to fix it up proper, but I'm gone too often. That's part of why I need the help." They rounded a bend in the road, and suddenly the ranch came into view. It was indeed small, a modest main house constructed of logs with a stone chimney, a barn, a corral, and off to one side, a tiny cabin. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that had turned golden with the season. "It's lovely," Lila said honestly. Nathan seemed pleased by her response. "That cabin there will be yours," he said, pointing. "It's simple but solid. Stove works, roof doesn't leak." He guided the wagon to the main house first, where he unloaded her trunk onto the porch. "I'll show you around, then help you get settled," he offered, extending a hand to help her down. Lila hesitated only briefly before accepting his assistance, balancing Samuel carefully as she stepped down from the wagon. The baby immediately began squirming, eager to explore this new environment. "He can crawl a bit now," Lila explained as she set Samuel on a blanket on the porch. "I have to watch him constantly." "Smart boy," Nathan observed as Samuel immediately began scooting toward the edge of the porch. Curious too. The main house was rustic but comfortable, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area, and 2 small bedrooms off to one side. It was bachelor neat, but in need of a woman's touch, dusty in the corners, dishes stacked haphazardly, clothes draped over chairs. "I warned you," Nathan said, looking slightly embarrassed at the state of the place. "It's fine," Lila assured him. "I can have this sorted in no time." They moved on to the barn, where 4 horses peered curiously over their stall doors, and then to the small cabin that would be hers. It was indeed basic, one room with a small stove, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a chest of drawers. But it was clean, and the window faced east to catch the morning sun. "Will it do?" Nathan asked, watching her face closely. Lila nodded, throat tight with emotion. After the past months of struggle and ostracism, this simple shelter felt like a palace. "Yes, it will do very well." "Thank you, Mr. Keller." "Nathan," he corrected gently. "If we're to be living and working on the same property, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Nathan," she repeated, testing the name. "And I'm Lila." He smiled, and for a moment they stood in companionable silence, the weight of her decision settling between them. "I'll bring your trunk over," he said finally. "And then I should check on the herd. Make yourself at home, Lila. We can discuss specifics of your duties tomorrow." As he left to fetch her trunk, Lila picked up Samuel, who had been exploring the cabin's wooden floor. "Well, my love," she whispered, "it seems we've found a new home." The first weeks at the ranch passed in a blur of activity. True to her word, Lila transformed the main house from a bachelor's disarray into a comfortable, orderly home. She cooked hearty meals, mended Nathan's work clothes, and kept the place spotless, all while caring for Samuel, who seemed to thrive in the open air of the ranch. Nathan, for his part, was everything she could have hoped for in an employer. He was respectful of her privacy, generous with provisions, and seemed genuinely delighted by Samuel's presence. Often in the evenings, after the day's work was done, He would sit on the porch of the main house with the baby on his knee, telling him stories about the horses or the stars that filled the Montana sky. It was on one such evening, nearly a month after their arrival, that Lila realized something had shifted between them. She had stepped out of her cabin to call Nathan for supper, only to find him showing Samuel the constellations, the baby cradled against his chest as if he belonged there. "That's the North Star," he was saying softly. "Always in the same place, always showing the way home. Important thing for a man to know, Samuel." The sight struck Lila with unexpected force, this strong, capable man cradling her son with such tenderness, teaching him things a father would teach. For a moment she couldn't speak, overcome by emotion she couldn't name. Nathan looked up, sensing her presence. "Is supper ready?" he asked, smiling. "Yes," she managed, extending her arms for Samuel. "I should put him to bed first." "I can hold him while you eat," Nathan offered. "We're having a good conversation about the stars, aren't we, little man?" Samuel gurgled happily in response, his tiny hand patting Nathan's chest. Lila hesitated, then nodded. "All right," she agreed, "but don't keep him out in the cold too long." They ate together as they always did, Samuel now sleeping peacefully in his cradle, which Nathan had moved to the main house for the evening. The conversation flowed easily between them, as it had come to do. Nathan told her about his day checking fences on the north property line, and she shared the progress she'd made on turning an old quilt into new clothes for Samuel. "I've been meaning to ask," Nathan said, as they finished the apple cobbler she'd made for dessert. "Would you be opposed to me teaching Samuel to ride when he's older?" The question, asked so casually, made Lila's heart skip. It implied a long-term arrangement she hadn't dared to contemplate. "That's years away," she said carefully. Nathan nodded, eyes on his plate. "I know. Just thinking ahead." Do you expect us to stay that long?" Lila asked, unable to keep the uncertainty from her voice. He looked up then, his blue eyes serious. "I hope you will, unless you're unhappy here." "No," she said quickly. "We're very happy, it's just I didn't think beyond the immediate future when I accepted your offer." "I understand." He pushed his plate away, leaning back in his chair. "Lila, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." Her pulse quickened with sudden apprehension. "Oh. I'm planning to go into town tomorrow for supplies. I'd like you and Samuel to come with me." It was the last thing she'd expected him to say. "To Utica? Why would you want that?" "Because you can't hide out here forever," he said gently. "And I want those town gossips to see that you're doing just fine without their approval." Lila shook her head. "They'll only talk more if they see us together. They'll assume things." "Let them," Nathan said, a hint of steel entering his voice. "I'm not ashamed to be seen with you and Samuel." "Are you ashamed to be seen with me?" "Of course not, but then it's settled. We'll go together." His expression softened. "Besides, winter's coming. You need proper boots and Samuel needs warmer clothes. My treat." "I can't accept that," Lila protested. "You already do so much for us." "Consider it a bonus for turning this place from a bachelor's hovel into an actual home." His smile returned. "Please, Lila, let me do this." In the end, she agreed, though anxiety gnawed at her through the night. The thought of facing the judgment of Utica again, of subjecting Samuel to those cold stares and whispered comments, made her stomach churn. But there was comfort in knowing she wouldn't face it alone this time. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a perfect late autumn day. Lila dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had faded with washing but was still presentable, and put Samuel in the cleanest of his little outfits. When they emerged from the cabin, Nathan was waiting with the wagon, dressed in a clean shirt with his dark hair neatly combed. "You both look fine," he said, helping them up onto the seat. The journey to town was pleasant, the landscape painted in the golds and russets of fall. Samuel, now 7 months old, babbled happily from Lila's lap, reaching occasionally for Nathan, who would playfully catch his little fingers. As they approached Utica, however, Lila's anxiety returned full force. She sat straighter, chin lifting in unconscious defiance. "Ready?" Nathan asked softly as they rolled down the main street. "As I'll ever be," she replied. The reaction to their arrival was immediate. People stopped in their tracks, staring openly as Nathan helped Lila down from the wagon, then took Samuel from her arms with practiced ease, settling the baby on his hip as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Mr. Olson's first," Nathan said, seemingly oblivious to the spectacle they were creating. "I need feed and some other supplies." They walked into the general store side by side, Samuel content in Nathan's arms. The silence that greeted them was profound, broken only by Mr. Olson's startled cough. "Keller," he said, eyes darting between them. "Miss James, didn't expect to see you back in town." "Just picking up supplies," Nathan replied casually. "Mrs. Keller has made quite a list." Lila nearly stumbled at his words, her eyes flying to his face. "Mrs. Keller." But Nathan's expression revealed nothing as he continued speaking to Olson, rattling off the items they needed as if he hadn't just dropped an explosive falsehood into the conversation. Stunned, Lila could only stand there as Nathan handed Samuel back to her and began selecting items from the shelves. She was acutely aware of the whispers starting around them, of Mrs. Peterson huddled with another woman by the fabric bolts, their heads together as they stared. "Lila, did you want to look at those boots?" Nathan called, gesturing to a display at the back of the store. Moving as if in a dream, Lila made her way to him. Samuel clutched tightly to her chest. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath. "Giving them something to really talk about," he murmured back, a glint of mischief in his blue eyes. "Play along. I'll explain later." Before she could argue, he placed a hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the boots. The touch, though gentle, sent a jolt through her system. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with such casual intimacy. "These should fit you," he said in a normal tone, selecting a pair of sturdy leather boots. "Try them on." As she sat to remove her worn shoes, she was aware of Mr. Olson approaching. "So, you two got married then?" the shopkeeper asked, unable to contain his curiosity. Nathan smiled easily. "Seems the right thing to do, doesn't it? Samuel needs a father." Olson's eyes widened. "You mean you're Samuel's father," Nathan finished firmly. "That's right." The lie, for Lila knew it was a lie, seemed to ripple through the store. She could almost see the gossip spreading, could imagine how quickly it would race through town. Nathan Keller had married Lila James and claimed her bastard child as his own. Part of her wanted to stand up and shout the truth, to refuse to be part of this deception. But another part, the part that had endured months of scorn and isolation, couldn't help but feel a fierce satisfaction at the shocked faces around them. They completed their shopping in record time, Nathan paying for everything, including a length of warm wool for new clothes for Samuel and the boots that fit Lila perfectly. As they left the store, laden with packages, Lila caught sight of Mrs. Bartlett across the street, watching them with an expression of thunderstruck disbelief. "Now for the smithy," Nathan said cheerfully, steering them in that direction. "I need to order some new horseshoes." "Nathan," Lila began, still reeling from his declarations in the store. "Later," he murmured, squeezing her elbow gently. By the time they finished their errands, the entire town seemed to be finding excuses to walk past them, to confirm with their own eyes the shocking development. Nathan played his role to perfection, treating Lila with attentive courtesy, carrying Samuel proudly, and referring to "my family" with easy confidence. It was mid-afternoon when they finally climbed back into the wagon to head home. Lila sat rigidly beside Nathan, Samuel now sleeping against her shoulder, exhausted from the excitement of the day. They were nearly a mile out of town before she found her voice. "Would you care to explain what that was all about?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her tone. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. "I told you I wanted those gossips to see you were doing fine. By lying. By claiming to be Samuel's father and my husband," he glanced at her then. "Is the idea so terrible? It's not true," she exclaimed. "You've started a whole new round of gossip based on falsehoods." "Have I?" He pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Lila, I've grown mighty fond of you and Samuel these past weeks, more than fond if I'm being honest." Her heart began to pound erratically. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to be just your employer. I'm saying that I look at that boy in your arms and I wish he was mine. I'm saying that what started as me wanting to help a woman being treated unfairly has turned into something else entirely." He took a deep breath. "I'm saying that I'd be proud to be Samuel's father and your husband if you'll have me." Lila stared at him, speechless. She had noticed the growing warmth between them, had caught herself watching him work, admiring the strength in his arms, the kindness in his eyes. But she had attributed it to gratitude, to the natural intimacy that develops between people sharing a home and daily life. "You can't mean that," she finally said. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he countered. "I know you're strong and brave. I know you love your son with a fierceness that takes my breath away. I know you laugh at my bad jokes and you make the best apple cobbler in Montana territory." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "And I know that when you look at me sometimes, your eyes say you might feel something too." Lila's cheeks burned. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Nathan assured her. "I sprung this on you rather suddenly, but I meant what I said in town. I want to be Samuel's father. I want to teach him to ride and shoot and find his way by the stars. And I want to be your husband if you'll give me the chance to court you proper." Samuel stirred against her shoulder, whimpering softly. Automatically, Lila began to rock him, her mind racing with Nathan's words. Could she trust this? Trust him? After Thomas had abandoned her at the first sign of trouble, leaving her to face the consequences alone. "Nathan, think about it," he interrupted gently. "That's all I ask. Think about it and know that I meant every word." He flicked the reins and the wagon started moving again. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just thoughtful, filled with unspoken possibilities. That night, after putting Samuel to bed, Lila sat outside her cabin, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. The stars glittered overhead, so much brighter here than they had been in town. She thought of Nathan's proposal, for that's what it had been, however unorthodox, and tried to sort through her jumbled emotions. There was attraction, certainly. Nathan was handsome, kind, and capable. There was gratitude, too, deep and abiding, for the sanctuary he had provided when they needed it most. But was there love? Could there be? She thought of how naturally he had taken to Samuel, how her son's eyes lit up when Nathan entered a room. She thought of the evenings spent in comfortable conversation, of the way he respected her opinions and valued her work. She thought of the flutter in her stomach when he smiled at her, when their hands accidentally touched. Was it enough to build a life on, to risk her heart again? The sound of footsteps made her look up. Nathan approached, carrying 2 steaming mugs. Without asking, he sat beside her on the small bench outside her cabin, offering one of the mugs. "Coffee," he said. "Thought you might need it. Thank you." She accepted the mug, letting its warmth seep into her fingers. They sat in silence for several minutes, sipping their coffee, looking at the stars. "I was engaged once," Nathan said suddenly. "Back in Texas before I came north. Her name was Caroline." Lila turned to look at him, surprised by this confidence. What happened? She died. Fever took her, summer of '73. His voice was soft, matter-of-fact, but Lila could hear the old pain beneath it. I thought I'd never want to marry after that. Threw myself into work, kept moving, never stayed in one place too long. I'm sorry, Lila said simply. Nathan nodded. Been a long time now. But I tell you this so you understand. I know about loss. I know about starting over. And I know that what I feel for you isn't just impulse or charity. He set his mug down, turning to face her. In the starlight, his face was shadowed, but his eyes caught the light, intense and sincere. I won't press you, he said. But I won't take back what I said either. I care for you, Lila James. I care for your boy. And I'd be honored if you'd consider making what we told the town today into truth. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then stood. Rest well, he said. I'll see you in the morning. She watched him walk back to the main house, his tall figure silhouetted against the night sky. Her lips formed words she wasn't ready to say aloud. I care for you too. The following week was a strange one. On the surface, nothing had changed. Lila continued her work in the house, cared for Samuel, and maintained a friendly but proper relationship with Nathan. But underneath, everything had shifted. There was an awareness between them now, a current of possibility that hadn't existed before. Nathan was true to his word, not pressing her for an answer but making his intentions clear in small ways. He brought wildflowers for the table, carved a small wooden horse for Samuel, and found excuses to spend his evenings in the main house rather than riding out to check the herd as he often did. For her part, Lila found herself paying more attention to her appearance, pinching color into her cheeks before serving meals, wearing her hair loose the way she'd noticed Nathan admiring. She caught herself watching him work from the window, appreciating the strength in his shoulders as he chopped wood or the gentleness in his hands when he handled the horses. It was during this strange, suspended time that winter announced its arrival with the first serious snowfall of the season. Lila woke to a world transformed, the familiar landscape of the ranch blanketed in white. Samuel, now crawling with determination and pulling himself up on furniture, pressed his hands against the cabin window in wonder. Snow, my love, Lila told him, lifting him for a better view. Your first snow. A knock at the door revealed Nathan, his hat and shoulders dusted with white. Thought you might want help getting to the house, he said. Path's slippery. Thank you, Lila replied, suddenly conscious of her unbrushed hair and plain nightdress beneath her shawl. Give me a moment to dress. He nodded, stepping back outside to wait. Lila hurriedly put on a dress, bundled Samuel in his warmest clothes, and opened the door to find Nathan had cleared a path from her cabin to the main house, the snow piled neatly on either side. You've been busy, she commented as they walked together, Nathan carrying Samuel, who was trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue. Up since dawn, he confirmed. Needed to check the horses, make sure the cattle are all right in the north pasture. He glanced at her. It's going to be a cold one today. Might be best if you and Samuel stay in the main house. Lila nodded, touched by his concern. I'll bring what we need for the day. As the day progressed, the snow continued to fall, heavy and relentless. By mid-afternoon, it was clear that this was no ordinary snowfall but the beginning of a serious storm. The wind picked up, howling around the eaves of the house, and the temperature dropped precipitously. I don't like the look of this, Nathan said, returning from another check on the animals. He stamped snow from his boots at the door, his face red with cold. Blizzard coming, I think. Lila looked up from where she was playing with Samuel on a blanket near the fireplace. Should we be worried? We've got plenty of firewood, food, and the house is solid. He hung his coat by the door. But I don't think you should go back to the cabin tonight. Too risky with the little one. Lila hesitated. They had maintained separate dwellings since her arrival, a propriety she had appreciated. But the idea of trudging through a blizzard with Samuel didn't appeal either. "You can take my room," Nathan offered, reading her thoughts. "I'll sleep out here by the fire." "I couldn't put you out of your bed," she protested. "Wouldn't be the first time I've slept on the floor," he said with a shrug. "Done it plenty on cattle drives." Before she could argue further, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, making her decision for her. "All right, thank you." As evening approached, the storm intensified. Nathan secured the shutters, banked the fire to last the night, and brought extra blankets for Samuel, who was to sleep in a makeshift bed of cushions in the bedroom. They ate a simple supper together, listening to the wind's fury outside, grateful for the sturdy walls around them. "I should check on the horses once more before turning in," Nathan said as they finished washing the dishes. "Be careful," Lila urged, a flutter of worry in her chest. He smiled at her concern. "Always am." But when he returned 20 minutes later, Lila knew immediately that something was wrong. He was limping badly, his face tight with pain. "What happened?" she gasped, hurrying to help him to a chair. "Slipped on some ice by the barn," he grimaced. "Wrenched my knee pretty good." Lila knelt beside his chair, examining the injury with gentle hands. The knee was already swelling visibly. "We need to get your boot off," she said, reaching for the laces. Nathan hissed in pain as she eased the boot from his foot. The knee beneath his trousers was swollen and beginning to bruise. "I'll make a cold compress," Lila decided. "And you're definitely not sleeping on the floor tonight." "I'll be fine," he protested. "You'll be crippled by morning if you don't rest that properly," she countered, her tone brooking no argument. "You take the bed. Samuel and I can manage out here." In the end, they compromised. The bed in Nathan's room was large enough that Lila could place Samuel's makeshift bed at one end, while Nathan stretched out at the other, his injured leg elevated on pillows. Lila would take the small cot in the spare room that Nathan used for storage. As she settled Samuel for the night, singing softly to him until his eyes drooped, she was acutely aware of Nathan watching them from the bed, his expression soft in the lamplight. "He's growing so fast," Nathan observed as Samuel finally drifted off to sleep. "Too fast," Lila agreed, brushing a curl from her son's forehead. "He'll be walking before we know it." "And riding not long after," Nathan added with a smile. Lila looked up at him, at this man who spoke so easily of a future that included them all. "How's your knee feeling?" "Better with the compress. Thank you for that." She nodded, suddenly shy in the intimate setting of his bedroom. "I should let you rest." "Lila," he said as she turned to leave, "I've been thinking about something." She paused at the door. "Oh, that cabin of yours, it's not well insulated." "Fine for now, but when the real winter sets in." He trailed off, then continued more firmly, "It makes more sense for you and Samuel to move into the main house. Permanently." Lila's pulse quickened. "Nathan." "Just practical thinking," he said quickly. "Nothing more intended. Though my offer still stands whenever you're ready to consider it." She studied him in the soft light, this kind, patient man who had changed her life so completely. "I have been considering it," she admitted quietly. "Every day." Hope flickered across his face, and I think I'd like to stay, here in the main house." She took a deep breath. "With you." Nathan sat up straighter, wincing slightly as his knee protested the movement. "Lila, are you saying?" "I'm saying yes," she whispered. "Yes to being your wife. Yes to you being Samuel's father. Yes to building a life together." For a moment, Nathan seemed frozen, as if afraid to believe what he was hearing. Then a smile broke across his face, radiant with joy. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Lila crossed the room to him, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "I'm sure. I care for you, Nathan Keller, more than I thought possible after everything." And Samuel adores you." She reached out, tentatively touching his face. "You've given us a home, safety, respect. But more than that, you've given us hope. How could I not love you for that?" Nathan captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I'll spend my life making sure you never regret this decision," he promised. "Both of you." Lila leaned down, and for the first time their lips met in a kiss, gentle at first, then deepening as Nathan pulled her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathing rapidly, faces flushed. "I should." Lila gestured vaguely toward the door. "Stay," Nathan said softly. "Just to sleep," he added quickly. "But I'd like to have you both here where I can see you, know you're safe." After a moment's hesitation, Lila nodded. She extinguished the lamp, then carefully settled herself beside Nathan, leaving Samuel's makeshift bed at the foot of their own. In the darkness, Nathan found her hand, twining their fingers together. "Good night, my love," he murmured. "Good night," she whispered back, the endearment warming her through. Outside, the blizzard raged, but inside the sturdy ranch house, a family had been born. Spring came to Montana in fits and starts, with warm days followed by sudden snowfall. But by April 1879, winter had finally released its grip on the land. The creek ran high with snowmelt, the pastures began to green, and on the ranch, new life was everywhere. Calves frolicking on spindly legs, wildflowers pushing through the soil, and in the main house, preparations for a wedding. Lila stood before the small mirror in what was now their bedroom, pinning tiny white flowers into her hair. Her dress, a simple creation of pale blue cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, had been ordered all the way from Bozeman for the occasion. "Mama pretty," came a voice from the doorway. Lila turned to see Samuel, now 13 months old and walking steadily, watching her with his father's solemn blue eyes. For Thomas might have sired him, but Nathan was his father in every way that mattered, as would be made official today, when Nathan not only married Lila, but formally adopted Samuel as his son. "Thank you, my love," she said, kneeling to straighten the tiny bow tie Nathan had insisted on for the occasion. "You look very handsome yourself." "Papa?" Samuel asked, his limited vocabulary always including the most important people in his world. "Papa is waiting for us at the church," Lila explained. "Are you ready to go see him?" Samuel nodded enthusiastically. In the months since Lila had accepted Nathan's proposal, their small family had settled into a rhythm of deep contentment. The blizzard that had brought them together that night had given way to a winter of shared meals, quiet evenings by the fire, and the gradual merging of their lives and hearts. By the time spring arrived, Lila could hardly remember what life had been like before Nathan, before his steady presence, his unwavering support, his gentle love that asked for nothing but gave everything. A knock at the front door startled her from her thoughts. It would be Dr. Fuller, who had agreed to drive them to the church in town and give Lila away. Despite everything that had happened in Utica, the doctor had remained a friend, one of the few townspeople who had treated her with consistent kindness. "Coming." She called, scooping Samuel onto her hip and gathering her small bouquet of wildflowers. Dr. Fuller greeted her with a wide smile. "My dear, you look radiant," he said warmly. "Thank you for doing this," Lila replied, accepting his help into the buggy. "It's my honor," the doctor assured her. "I always knew you deserved happiness. I'm glad you found it with Nathan." The ride to town was filled with Samuel's excited chatter and Dr. Fuller's kind reminiscences. As they approached Utica, Lila felt a flutter of nerves. This would be her first time back since the day Nathan had declared himself Samuel's father, setting in motion the events that led to today. "Nervous?" Dr. Fuller asked, noting her silence. "A little," she admitted. "It's been a long time since I've faced the town." "Things have changed," he told her. "Time has a way of softening opinions, and Nathan is well respected. That counts for a lot." The small church at the edge of town came into view, and Lila's heart leapt at the sight of horses and wagons gathered outside. Nathan had insisted on inviting the entire town, despite her misgivings. "It's not about them," he'd said. "It's about us standing before God and everyone, declaring our love and our family. No secrets, no shame." Now, as Dr. Fuller helped her from the buggy, Samuel clinging to her skirts, Lila was grateful for Nathan's insistence. This was not a day for hiding or shame. This was a day of celebration. Inside the church, she was surprised to find nearly every pew filled. Some faces were merely curious, others genuinely welcoming. At the front, Nathan stood tall and handsome in a new suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his blue eyes finding hers immediately as she entered. The love in his gaze gave her courage as she began the walk down the aisle, Samuel toddling beside her, his small hand in hers, Dr. Fuller on her other side. When they reached the front, Nathan stepped forward to lift Samuel into his arms, then extended his free hand to Lila. Together, they turned to face Reverend Whitaker, a family already in every way that mattered, now seeking only the blessing of God and community. "Dearly beloved," the Reverend began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today." The ceremony was simple and brief. They exchanged vows, Nathan's voice strong and sure, Lila's softer but equally determined. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tender passion that several of the older ladies in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. But it was the second part of the ceremony that truly moved Lila to tears. Nathan set Samuel on his feet between them, kneeling to the child's level. "Samuel James," he said solemnly, "today I become not just your mama's husband, but your papa in the eyes of God and the law. I promise to love you, protect you, and guide you all the days of my life." He produced a tiny silver pendant on a leather cord, a miniature version of the cross he himself wore. "This is for you," he told Samuel, fastening it around the boy's neck. "So you'll always know you're my son, and I'm your father." Samuel's small fingers immediately went to the pendant, his eyes wide with wonder. "Papa," he said clearly, and then threw his arms around Nathan's neck in a fierce hug that brought several audible sniffles from the congregation. Lila wasn't sure when the mood in the church had shifted, when judgment had given way to acceptance, even approval. But as they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Samuel perched on Nathan's hip. She felt the change in the smiles that greeted them, in the hands that reached out to touch them in blessing. Outside, the spring sunshine bathed everything in golden light. Nathan helped Lila into their wagon, now festooned with ribbons by some well-wisher, and they headed back to the ranch where a small celebration awaited with the few true friends they had invited: Dr. Fuller, Miss Penelope, the widow Abernathy, and a couple of ranchers Nathan had befriended. "Happy, Mrs. Keller?" Nathan asked as they drove, Samuel dozing between them, exhausted from the excitement. "Very, Mr. Keller," Lila replied, leaning against his shoulder. "I never thought I could be this happy again." He kissed the top of her head. "This is just the beginning, my love." Just the beginning. And he was right. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, their happiness only deepened. The ranch prospered under Nathan's capable management, and Lila transformed the main house into a true home, filled with warmth and laughter. Samuel grew like a weed, his vocabulary expanding daily, his curiosity boundless. Gradually, their place in the community of Utica shifted as well. Nathan's unwavering support of his wife and adopted son, combined with his fair dealings and quiet integrity, earned respect that extended to his family. Lila found herself included in community events, invited to sewing circles, her baking requested for church socials, even Mrs. Bartlett, after months of stiff resistance, eventually unbent enough to compliment Lila on Samuel's beautiful manners at a harvest festival. It wasn't quite an apology, but in its way, it was an acknowledgement of Lila's worth, of the legitimacy of her family, of the respect she had earned. By the time winter returned, bringing with it the anniversary of that fateful blizzard that had brought them together, Lila had additional news to share. As they sat before the fire on a snowy evening, Samuel already asleep in his new bedroom that Nathan had built onto the house, she placed her husband's hand on her still flat stomach. "Spring will bring us another blessing," she told him softly. The wonder that spread across Nathan's face was something Lila knew she would remember all her days. "A baby," he whispered. "Truly," she nodded, tears of joy welling in her eyes. "Our baby." "Oh, Lila," he breathed, gathering her into his arms. "My love, my heart, my life." Later, as they lay in bed, Nathan's hand protectively covering her abdomen, Lila reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the darkest moment of her life alone, scorned, struggling to care for her newborn son, to this sanctuary of love and family. "What are you thinking?" Nathan murmured, noticing her contemplative silence. "About how close I came to giving up," she admitted. "That day in the store when you first spoke to me, I was at the end of my rope, Nathan. Mrs. Bartlett had just told me I was being forced out of my cottage, had suggested I give Samuel up." She shuddered at the memory. "If you hadn't been there that day." "But I was," he said firmly, "and you would have found a way, Lila. You're the strongest woman I know." She turned in his arms to face him. "Why did you help us, really? You never fully explained." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. "When I saw you in that store," he finally said, "standing there with your chin up despite how they were treating you, with your baby held close like you'd fight the world for him, you reminded me of my mother." "Your mother?" Lila repeated, surprised. In all their time together, Nathan had rarely spoken of his family. He nodded. "She raised me alone after my father died in the war. I was just a baby, not much older than Samuel was when I met you. The town we lived in, small place in Texas, they weren't kind to her. A young widow with a child trying to make her way." His voice took on a hard edge. "They made assumptions, spread rumors, made life harder than it needed to be." "Oh, Nathan," Lila breathed, understanding dawning. "She was strong like you, worked herself to the bone to provide for me. But it wore her down over the years, all that judgment, all that loneliness." He swallowed hard. "She died when I was 16. Consumption, the doctor said, but I always thought it was just weariness, soul-deep weariness." Lila touched his face gently. "I'm so sorry." "When I saw you that day," he continued, "it was like seeing her again, and I thought not this time I could do something about it." He smiled softly. "I just wanted to help at first. I didn't know I was going to fall in love with you both." "I'm glad you did," Lila whispered. "Fall in love with us, I mean." "Best thing I ever did," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her lips. "Now get some rest. You're growing our baby in there." As winter deepened outside, Lila drifted to sleep in the safety of her husband's arms, her heart full with the knowledge that the child growing within her would be born into a home overflowing with love, a far cry from the circumstances of Samuel's birth. This child would know only acceptance, only belonging. And Samuel, her precious firstborn who had once been considered a burden, a shame, would grow up knowing the love of not one but two parents who adored him, in a community that had learned slowly, imperfectly, but surely that family was defined not by convention, but by love. 5 years later, on a brilliant summer day, Lila stood on the porch of their ranch house, expanded now to accommodate their growing family, and watched as Nathan taught Samuel to ride his very own pony, just as he had once promised. Beside them, 3-year-old Grace clapped her hands in excitement, her dark curls so like her father's bouncing in the sunlight. In Lila's arms, baby Joseph, just 4 months old, slept peacefully against her shoulder. "Look, Mama," Samuel called, his face alight with pride as he guided his pony in a careful circle. "I'm doing it." "I see you, my love," she called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Nathan looked up, meeting her eyes across the yard, his smile so full of love it made her breath catch even after all these years. He said something to Samuel, then crossed to the porch, taking the sleeping baby from her arms. "Our boy's a natural," he said, pride evident in his voice, "just like his papa." Lila leaned into his side, her heart so full it felt it might overflow. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Nathan asked, brushing a kiss against her temple. "For saying those words all those years ago, for being his father, for being mine." Nathan's arm tightened around her. "Best decision I ever made," he said simply. "Best family a man could ask for." As they stood together, watching Samuel master his pony while Grace danced around them, the baby sleeping peacefully between them, Lila thought of how far they had come from that day in the general store. From scandal and shame to this, a life rich with love, respect, and belonging. She thought of the words that had changed everything, spoken by a stranger who had become her heart's companion. "Then let me be his father." And he had been. Every day in every way that mattered, not through blood, but through the daily choice to love, to nurture, to protect. In the end, that was what made a family, not circumstance, not convention, but love freely given and gratefully received. A lesson Utica had finally learned, and one that had transformed not just their lives, but the heart of a community. "I love you," she whispered to her husband, the words simple but carrying the weight of all they had built together. "And I love you," Nathan replied, his blue eyes crinkling with the smile that still made her heart skip. "Forever and always, forever and always." As promises went, Lila thought, it was the easiest one she had ever kept.